Gentleness does not mean being a sissy. Lessons from a politician? This is Wretched Radio. Representative Mike Johnson from the great state of Louisiana is going to model for us how you and I can be gentle. Interestingly, there are people who are passing around the clip that you're about to hear to go, look at how he got him. Look at how he got him. He tore him up. And, well, frankly, I think he did. But as you listen to it, I think Mike Johnson, a fellow, he used to be with the Alliance Defending Freedom organization. I interviewed him probably 20 years ago. A good brother from Louisiana who is now a rep. He was grilling Attorney General Garland, concerned that maybe, just maybe, some decisions are being made out of the AG office that have a conflict of interest. You'll hear those details. And so Representative Johnson, he wants some answers. And I was struck by this, not just because of his persistence to keep the fellow on trying at least to answer the actual question as opposed to just talking, pointing it. And so he was persistent. And he was just, nope, I got to ask you this. Nope, I'm going to come at you. Didn't answer my question. But listen to his tone. I think he personifies gentleness. Now, there's a good chance you could hear this and go, well, it seems a little aggressive. Well, gentleness doesn't mean that you can't ever be aggressive. It's just how you go about the business of doing it. Tone. Gentleness is power under control. Representative. Mike Johnson has some power. And in this congressional hearing, presumably he has some power at least to reveal what might be going on that could be shenanigans in the Attorney General's office. He is a fellow who's got a staff. He gets to vote on legislation, and yet he presented himself like a gentle man.
It also concerns us that your actions may have been motivated by your family's financial stake in this issue. Published reports show that your son-in-law co-founded a company called Panorama Education. We now know that that company publishes and sells critical race theory and so-called anti-racism materials to schools across the country. And it works with school districts nationwide to obtain and analyze data on students, often without parental consent. On its website, the company brags that it's surveyed more than 13 million students in the U.S. It's raised $76 million from powerful investors, including people like Mark Zuckerberg, just since 2017. My first question is this.
Before we get to his first question, I have to confess to you, if I were in that seat, I might think my tone would not have been nearly as restrained. Okay, so your son. Well, isn't this coincidence? Your son happens to own a company that profits from the decisions that you're making. What do you say about that, Pally boy? And that's probably how I'd go about doing it. Mike Johnson was actually, I think, personifying gentleness, even as this did get a little bit heated. But notice how he keeps it under control.
Are you familiar with Title V of the Code of Federal Regulations, which addresses the rules of impartiality for executive branch employees and officials?
I am very familiar with it, and I want to be clear once again that there's nothing in this memorandum which has any effect on the kinds of curriculums that are taught or the ability of parents to complain about the kinds of...
I understand your position on the free speech of parents.
Not a position, it is...
Wait just a minute. The question is, the thing that has concerned many of those parents that are showing up at these school board meetings, the very basis of their objection and their vigorous debate, as you mentioned earlier, is the curricula, the very curricula that your son-in-law is selling. So to millions of Americans, I mean, my constituents, I was home all weekend, I got an earful about this. They're very concerned about that. Subpart E of that federal regulation says an employee of the executive branch is discouraged from engaging in conduct that's likely to affect the financial interest of someone close to them. Your son-in-law, your daughter, clearly meets that definition. And so the question is, did you follow that regulation? Did you have the appropriate agency ethic official look into this? Did you seek guidance as the federal regulation requires?
That's a great question, because you can make a decision as an attorney general without being influenced by your son's business. You could still make that decision because you think it's the right decision. What Representative Johnson is bringing up is the process of making that decision. Did you run this by other people? Did you check this out? Because, hey, there could be a whiff of scandal involved, so that is why there have been bumper cars or bumper rails put on making decisions where somebody that we know or care about might benefit. That's a good question. He doesn't get an answer. And so he gently persists.
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
Understand that, but did you seek ethics counsel before you issued a letter that directly relates to the financial interest of your family? Yes or no?
This memorandum does not relate to the financial interests of anyone. It's against.
I take that as a no.
Memorandum is against violence and threats of violence.
Will you, Mr. Attorney General, will you commit to having the appropriate ethics designee review the case and make the results public?
I have to confess to you, I would love to talk to him. I'd like to interview Mike Johnson again. All right, Representative, how are you able to stay this controlled? The guy's given talking points. That's one of the most agitating things, especially when you've got a limited amount of time and somebody probably leading the hearing that's antagonistic toward your position and your line of questioning. And yet he holds it together. I'd love to know how, maybe fruit of the Spirit.
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
I understand your talking point. You're not answering my question, Mr. Attorney General. With all due respect, will you submit to an ethics review of this matter, yes or no?
There's no company in America, or hopefully no law-abiding citizen in America, who believes that threats of violence should not be prevented. There are no conflicts of interest that anyone could have.
According to you, but sir, with due respect, that's the purpose of the federal regulation. We need objective third parties to review our activities. You don't get to make that decision yourself. It doesn't matter. You're the chief law enforcement of this country. This raises questions in the minds of millions of Americans, and your impartiality is being called into question. Why would you not submit to a simple ethics review of that?
One wonders if the liberal talk shows, which are pretty much all of them, are going to use these clips of Mike to go, look at how he was treating the Attorney General. I would say the same thing. Yeah, look at how he's treating him. He's being persistent. He should be. I think that he's got some reasonable questions that he'd like to have answers to, and he seems to be getting nothing but talking points. And yet, I don't think they're going to be able to say that he's a jerk. I know they do that with some of the conservative guys in Washington. I just don't know how they're going to be able to do it with a fellow like this who is practicing Christian gentleness. It doesn't mean that the conversation can never go up in intensity. Gentleness does not mean that that is forbidden. What gentleness means is that I'm not losing it. I want the answer to the question with my child. Son, you continue to not be disclosing the details of where you were last night. I am going to find out. Now, if I find out from you, it will go better for you. If I have to find out from somebody else, it won't. Son, what were you doing last night? Okay, that's still cranking it up, but it's not. Now tell me the truth, you little hooligan. If I have to go find out, just wait until you haven't felt the belt until I get old. Okay, that's not power under control. Gentleness does not mean being a sissy. It means actually being a gentleman. Isn't it funny that we actually use that term to describe men who aren't, it's not like they hold their teacup with their pinky finger out. It doesn't mean that they hold their silverware rightly or even chew with their mouth closed, which I wish you would if you don't. Instead, it's having power, having authority, and not losing it, not snapping, not yelling, not biting, not being angry toward, not sounding like you'd like to put a dagger in their heart. Instead, it's having it under control. How do we get that? How do we grow in that? Well, the obvious answer would be the means of growth: preaching, praying, reading your Bible, fellowshipping, ordinances. But this needs to be done in the context of family and the local church, not one or the other, but both. Because you're going to get different perspectives from different people, because your kids might not be able to be honest with you if you say, "Is your papa gentleman?" But your buddies at church can if they love you and you've been working together in the field and you've been fellowshipping with one another. We need help with gentleness. Perhaps, especially in this day and age of social media. Are we a member of a local church that is helping us to grow in gentleness? This is Wretched Radio. If you would like to watch the entire clip from this episode, just skedaddle to our website, wretched.org.
Detective Friel, can you tell us what's happening here?
What's happening here is a clear demonstration of the noetic effect of the fall. Genesis 2, Paul elaborates in Romans chapter 3. Jeremiah tells us that everybody's heart is deceitful and wicked. What's going on here? Sin.
Are you confident that these thieves will be brought to justice?
4 words: great white throne judgment.